Why am I doing an episode on the US election? Why did I stay up half the night to watch the analysis as the results came through? Let's be straight. I grew up in London. A lot of the best movies and TV series I watched were Hollywood productions. My family's TV pumped US propaganda and produce into our living room, and we all lapped it up like it was the sweetest honey money could buy. I hear the American accent and it's normal to me. I have American friends. The culture is familiar. The ethics are known. The principles, as described on the packet, are agreeable, even if the contents tend to differ. I am more critical of what the US produces, but I still love American TV, movies, and literature. There are some brilliant scientists, innovators, thinkers, and artists of US origin, and I still dislike the politics that emanate from Pennsylvania Avenue. And that is the point. The US election's consequences are not limited to the US. They emanate from there and spread. The tentacles of corruption, the tendrils of conspiracy, the terrors of foreign policy. When the US Supreme Court reversed Roe v. Wade, communities in Italy and Germany started talking about banning abortion in Europe. When the US banned Huawei from sensitive infrastructure projects, the UK followed suit. When the US labels an organization a threat to national security, European nations follow suit. And when Trump complains that NATO partners aren't pulling their weight, the checkbooks come out. So, do I want the US government to have such a huge influence on the rest of the world? No. Does the reality care what I think? Also no. And that is why what happens in the US elections is interesting for people outside of the US. Thank you, Esheru, for your time. Turn the mic clocking out. Enjoy.
Dung weche pek kod welo mabiro etu under mic. Dung parodit kod jok mawuoye etu under mic. Seche tin sud buta wawinji etu under mic. Ola wachokre wabed piny bi wawinje ero chako Dungo mit ndi podcast makende.
I am joined by Esheru for a special episode today, interrupting our normal series for obvious reasons. Esheru, how are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. I guess I'm a bit like most people. Yeah, surprised at the results of the US elections, but I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I mean, surprised. You are an aware political commentator, so I guess you're not too surprised. I mean, let's face it, in a two-horse race, anything can happen, right?
Absolutely. And, you are correct. I'm not that surprised, although I would have thought that knowing what Donald Trump has obviously been through, his court cases, etc., and convictions, one would have thought that the outcome might have been different.
But indeed, as things stand, a quick check on the current status. So obviously he has won at this point. At least the predictions are such that he has won. But he has rifled his way through the 270 seat mark, and it looks as though he's on course to win something of a significant majority, which is a surprise in many ways, I think.
Absolutely. Like I said just before, considering the legacy he has, but I think that we probably don't have to question what people's motives were for voting for Donald Trump. I've spoken to various people across the US, family and friends, and they all voted for different reasons. They voted all three candidates, and they've given me their reasons why they voted for all three candidates, and I'm sure they're all valid. And on this side of the Atlantic, we're going to see things slightly different. But everybody had their reasons for voting the way they did. But like I said, I would have thought a different result might have ensued this morning here.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting to see is the gender and by race breakdown for the different sort of categories that voted for each candidate. If we look at the black vote, so black men, 78% voted for Kamala Harris, 20% voted for Trump. Black women, 92% voted for Kamala Harris, 7% voted for Trump. Now, we both know Trump runs racist policies. He's not hidden them. He denies that he's racist, but he still promotes and talks about racist conspiracy theories and policies. Do we foresee some, because he is a petty guy, can you foresee a small or perhaps even a large element of revenge in his presidency coming up?
To be honest, I'm not sure if he's astute enough to even act out revenge. But we do know, like sex, racism sells. And in order to get people on side to do whatever is they need done, a little bit of racism here or there, can always work wonders. So it's something that and if you look at the Trump voter base, not all Trump voters are racists, but a hell of a lot of racists vote for Trump, right? From where I'm sitting, I guess it's something that they can use in order to, forward their aims at a later date in the next 4 years.
Yeah. And then just talking about, because, as you said, he's a convicted rapist. We knew about how deeply he and how highly he rates women in the previous election campaign with some of the comments. This is all clear. However, 47% of white women voted for Kamala Harris only. 52% of white women voted for Trump. 37% of Hispanic Latino women voted Trump. These are significant numbers of women.
What I see is this. Now, I had a very good conversation. Let's talk about Latinos very quickly. And I don't want to offend anyone here, but I had a conversation with a friend this morning who identifies as black, female, here I'm in Sweden currently, but she's in London. And we were talking about, you have groups of people that class themselves as white, either they're white passing or they still see themselves or align themselves more with white. Latinos are one of these groups. Not all, but a greater majority see themselves akin to white. Indians can also be the same. Again, not all of them, but large numbers of them. And what you have to think about is these are different groups, maybe Latinos, maybe brown people from certain parts of Southeast Asia. But also, let's remember, when we talk about misogynistic and sexist men, we never talk about misogynistic and sexist women that support these men, and often for personal gain. Okay? And while I'm not saying that the women that voted for Trump are misogynist and sexist, a lot of these women tend to have positions of power in organizations, and they support their bosses who tend to be male, misogynistic and sexist for personal gain to get ahead. And they probably see their bosses, men that they look up to, or when they look at Trump, they see their bosses or men that they aspire to want to be like or follow in the footsteps of. Do you understand me? I hope that's not offending anybody. It's just kind of how I view certain situations.
Yep. If that has offended anybody, please write in. The intention is never from either of us, I imagine, of knowing Esheru, of course. The intention is never to offend people.
Absolutely. Yep. And this is just my own opinion, and it is something I've often shared on Twitter, so it isn't it isn't anything I'm making up now. And of course, I'm in the corporate world myself, and I do see some women can be, and of course, speaking to other females will say that often they don't lift each other up, and that they tend to take the side of men in organizations that have power for personal gain. And I'm wondering if I'm seeing that with a lot of these women voting for Trump. I mean, what other reason would females vote for a man that's being convicted of sex offenses against women? What other reason could there be?
Yeah, I wish I knew. I have to, as you say, there are always variations. There's never a set rule. If you remember in 2016, the Democrats and Clinton herself was extremely confident that she would win the majority of the black vote. And she actually did not win as many black voters as she thought she would. And that's also something we should take into consideration. You can't just say, okay, I have the black vote, because people are individuals. You don't all vote as a block, do you? If you register, if you identify yourself as a certain kind of category, you don't all vote the same way.
I think that's, and also think about black people. I think that people have viewed us as a monolith for far too long. You know, there are different cultures and different subsets within what's called black people, and of course we all think differently. You know, I know for example, if you look at America today, one of the things that we're noticing, and also in Britain, one of the things we're noticing as black people, you have some groups of black people that come from a particular part of the world that views life differently to us that live in the UK or live in America or from the UK and America. So you're always going to have differences based on culture.
We shouldn't really only focus on race. That's not the only issue, of course. It's an important issue. It is one that is quite close to our hearts, of course. But as you said, the dynamics of race, the decision-making behind certain racial groups is extremely varied. And indeed deserving of much greater research and analysis than we're going to give it. Let's look in general a little bit. What should we expect, if it's possible to expect anything from the unpredictable man that is Donald Trump?
Oh, goodness me. What can we expect? I mean, it's very difficult to say, okay? Now, what I can tell you, when I look at Trump, a lot of people voted for him because they were fed up of what was happening in the Middle East. They were fed up of what was happening in Ukraine. They wanted all that money to stop going to Ukraine and to helping the efforts in Israel and come back into the country and help people, which I understand. So I can understand why some people didn't vote for Kamala Harris for that particular reason. I'm not saying what they did is right or wrong, but I can understand. It'd be very difficult to say because he's unpredictable. This time, what makes things different, he does have Elon Musk around him, as we know, and that can make things different. Who are his advisors? Who are his team? Who are, what the people around him, what do they have to gain by him being in power? But what I can definitely see is if people voted thinking that he's going to pull out of Ukraine and he's going to pull out of Israel, I think that people are sorely misguided. And the reason why I say that is simply this. Presidents are spokespeople for a country, and they're often spokespeople for the manufacturing and various industries of that particular country. The venture capitalists, the weapons manufacturers, these are the businesses and organizations which more or less decide policy in the country. Okay, they donate to political parties and individuals. In return, they want a favor, even though we're told that it's not that way. We do know that it is that way. And let's look at America. The top 5 weapons manufacturers in the world are all from the US. Okay, they've been at the top 5 since they started compiling a list of the top world's manufacturers since 2000. Okay, so it's 24 years at the top. Their business is war. Their business isn't peace. Peace is bad for business. There is no vested interest for war to stop in the Middle East, in Israel, Palestine, Yemen, Syria, Iran, or Ukraine. So anybody thinking that Trump's going to stop these things from happening, I think is swallowing the sky. That's the first thing. Secondly, we've heard about Project
2025, yeah.
Project 2025, and we've heard about all these things he tends to do. I'm not sure if I believe that these things will happen because there's too many laws that you have to get through in order for it to happen. There's too much discussion, and the president can't take a lot of these decisions by himself. But I certainly see some things getting worse for some groups of people in the country. I can certainly see things happening with immigration. He's threatened to close the borders and not let anybody in. I can certainly see that happening, for sure. But everything else is very difficult to say right about now.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously have talked about mass deportations in some, depending on which interview he had. We're talking something between 2 million and 21 million people. They promised very quickly to get rid of, or to deport, I should say, politically speaking, 1 million people almost straight away. I mean, these are substantial undertakings, which it's kind of hard to imagine how that could even be done. I can't imagine the kind of unrest that's going to cause within some kind of communities. There will, I believe, be some kind of pushback from these communities. They will not accept it. They will not go sort of take this lying down, so to speak. So what we can probably predict is some very distasteful scenes in neighborhoods.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And also, along with that, look at the cost. Who's going to foot the bill for all of this? Are you just going to throw people out and give them $20? I mean, or leave them with nothing? Where are you going to throw them out to? Are they going to be deported back to their country of origin? You know, it's too big a problem, and I don't know if that will ever materialize. But like you say, there will be some attempts, and it will lead to some social or civil unrest in certain parts of the country, in certain communities, for sure.
As you know, I think you were one of the individuals to recommend that I read the book, The New Jim Crow. And The New Jim Crow, it focuses very heavily on the war on drugs. And this became like one of the big points of Reagan's presidency. And then it was continued thereafter by Bush and also by Clinton. It's never really gone away. And Trump wants to make it a kind of cornerstone of also his presidency in his fight against crime, so to speak. So this also ties into that basically almost the destruction of certain kinds of neighborhoods.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the book itself by Professor Michelle Alexander, definitely a good read for any listeners out there. And you know, what she expertly did was show how they decimated the African American communities by locking up slaves in the black population for stupid things. And this is where the phrase "from school to prison" pipeline came in. I think she coined the phrase, in fact. But many years later, a film came out called The House I Live In by a guy called Eugene Jarecki. David Simon, who wrote The Wire, takes part in this documentary. And what transpired was because the school to prison pipeline worked extremely well in African American communities, it has now spilled out into white neighborhoods. And this isn't a new phenomenon. This has happened for about 10 years now. So they tried and tested it with African Americans. Now white Americans experiencing it. And this is something that Donald Trump wants to continue. Because let's look at the private prison system. Private prison systems, they'll enter a part of America, a particular place in the US. They'll buy a patch of land for $1. But what they'll say to the local community simply is, we'll build a prison here, we'll provide jobs for the local people, and they'll build a hotel, and McDonald's will come in, and Wendy's and a few other companies will come in, and then they'll employ people in the prisons, do the jobs for all these large companies that sit on the NASDAQ and the FTSE 100 stock exchanges, for jobs for less than what people do those jobs outdoors. So it's an entire business, okay? And because it generates so much money, there is an incentive for people to have this going. And of course, the local police force is then incentivized to get people convicted on charges so they can get convicted and get sent to prison. So it's an entire business a business model that actually works.
Yeah, something also then thereafter to watch out for, unfortunately. We could go on more, and we did say we only wanted to do a short one. So I'll try to do two very, very quick questions. Does it even matter the personal flaws that Trump has? Because he's not going to get reelected after this. So who cares about his flaws hereafter, right?
Very true. Does it really matter? Well, if you think about, there was a documentary that came on TV some years ago called Altered Statesman. You might be able to find it on YouTube, and it spoke about various leaders of the world, from the old Soviet Union to America, and I believe Germany. They may have showcased 5 or 6 leaders of that particular time throughout the 60s and 70s, and all of them were under the influence of some form of drug, whether it was barbiturates or amphetamines or cocaine or alcohol. And of course, as a result of their drug use, it altered the way that they were, right? They became unpredictable, etc. So Donald Trump, it's possible. It's possible. In answer to your question.
All right, and one final then question: what kind of knock-on effects should we expect in Europe and beyond?
Oh wow, that's an issue. I think certainly sitting here in London. I was actually watching Swedish TV this morning, and former Prime Minister Fredrik Reinfeldt was talking about how Trump's election will affect world trade, first of all, stock markets. I've not read much of the business news today, so I'm not sure how it has affected. One of the things he did mention was Brexit, and even though most people in Europe don't talk about Brexit anymore, it's a foregone conclusion. It's still very much a topic in the minds of British people because it isn't a done deal. And what's happened as a result of Britain leaving the EU, they become increasingly under the sphere of Washington's influence and isolated from the rest of the world. And certainly for Britain, it will have an effect on the economy. For the rest of Europe, it's very difficult to say. But I can certainly speak for England, and it could have some negative impact. Certainly if he decides to, I believe, and I spoke to a friend who has an online business, but I think that he wanted to bring in like an $800 tariff for every, it wasn't every unit of item, but for every shipment. I think it's currently down at $200, but I believe it's going to increase. And if that doesn't, it's going to end up costing companies a hell of a lot of money as a result.
Yeah. His trade policy is basically tariff, and more tariffs, and that seems to be the way to go. Some observers have commented that there will immediately be, I suppose, that the stock markets will bounce because he is basically a promoter of the oil industry and thereafter the car industry, and so these industries will look at that and think, "Oh, cool! Now we can really make some money." And this obviously now will have an impact on COP29, which is going to start as well in the next few days. Another genocidal petro state, which has already set itself up to make deals. But now that Trump has come in, and BP will be buzzing. So therefore, I suppose, unfortunately, what's going to suffer? The climate and our future.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, in Britain, we have these people that were locked up for climate protesters who are trying to highlight the danger of climate change, and they're being sent to prison. And the current prime minister, before he was prime minister, when he was approached to ask, for his opinion, he says, well, what they should really do is trust in the legal process. How can they trust in the legal process when politicians are often bought and do the bidding of these organizations? And if you look at Brexit as another prime example, the EU would buy products in bulk and then ship it from one place, and then we'd get it from the EU. Now Britain, little small Britain, is shipping fish from Indonesia and as far away as New Zealand. I mean, to buy for a small piece of lamb or fish, is it really worth destroying the environment from a stupid harebrained scheme because you want it to be alone? The knock-on effect is huge, but I think that many of the people who are involved in these areas of work probably see themselves as not being alive at the time when things really do start to change, so they really don't care too much about it when they should be, because it is about a legacy of what they leave behind or what we leave behind once we're no longer here, and our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren take over the world.
Indeed. Okay, then in that case, we'll leave it there. Esheru, thank you very much for your insight. It's been a long night and a tough day, but thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Lovely to speak to you again.
Two and a mic.